But it's also true for medicine, for philosophy, for architecture, because people were working in all those fields. And the reason why we weren't told anything about this was either that our teachers were ignorant or that a political decision had been taken not to tell us the truth. We were sort of in Plato's cave, where people are brought up in a situation where they don't see the truth. They are given to create that something, become technically skilled, while we have technically unskilled youth and technically unskilled elders. And if you want jobs, you've got to jump on a boat and go somewhere. Now, all that wouldn't happen if we knew what we have and what we should do with it. We wouldn't export raw materials because we have a population that can process it, make money from it, and bring the money home to develop our country. But let me not get on.
Yes, thank you. I studied Chinese, and I know that when you start learning the characters, you start by learning what they call pinyin, and the pinyin is in alphabets. So they combine the alphabet, and then when you get to know about the words, then they start introducing you to the characters. Now, I want to know, if you set out to learn hieroglyphics, what is the mode? Where does it start from and where does it go?
Well, there are about 26 basic letters, almost like the English alphabet. So that's the easiest way to start. And you learn what are called pictograms. And then from there you can move to biliterals. Sorry, I'm so tired. And then the triliterals as well. And those I haven't memorized. Those I still use. I use the dictionary every time I have to transcribe and transliterate. But having the basic 26 is always a start, and then you can go on and learn the biliterals and then go on from there. That's the way I approached it. So yeah.
That language was structured in such a way that the alphabet was used, the alphabet of 26 basic letters was used to express sound. So if you know how to read the alphabet, you can approximate the sound. But after each word, there was a determinative, which something that determines the meaning. And the meaning was an image. For example, if you say a word, if you use a word like kim means black, but black what? If there is a sign meaning a town after that, then it's a black town. If there is a woman after that word, then it would, the sound would be himmet, and the woman would indicate that you're talking about human beings, and so forth. So the way they wrote at that time was to indicate the sound with one code and the meaning with something that reinforced it, so that it was a very precise language, you see.
With what you just described, with Indonesian, how descriptive can it get then if you're solely reliant on what you call a determinant? How descriptive can the language get?
Very. I'm so sleepy. baby, so my brain is fried. But the list of activities, there are man and his occupations, woman and her occupations, there are animals and birds, and so many birds. So I had never seen so many birds described in my life. Like you have a bird that's looking for something to find. That's the description for finding. So imagine just that. The possibilities are endless. They think of things. You have parts of the body, parts of animal bodies. They go all the way. They thought about everything. It's very descriptive.
Do you think that the Metunetu or the hieroglyphics could be the common language that we can use going forward instead of going to France, instead of going to Germany and all that kind of stuff?
No. That's the short answer. As a writing system, it is extremely demanding, and there's no point in asking people to learn a demanding code when about language, which we need to use all the time. So, the simple alphabet, much better for reaching large numbers of people than a complicated system that uses a combination of the alphabet and images. That said, the study of Medunetia, the study of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, enables us to understand the content of the culture of Africa thousands of years ago, and to see what people were doing, how they thought, what their preoccupations were, what problems they solved, what techniques they developed, so that if we in our turn face problems, we have a resource to go to. This has been missing in African intellectual life because we were told we didn't have any intellectual resources. When you are told that, whenever you face a problem, you say, okay, I need to go somewhere to borrow the information that I require. And you know what happens in that situation? Every African leader who's trying to solve an urgent problem goes to the World Bank, the IMF, whatever, and what they have to tell us invariably deepens our dependence on them. It also tells us to destroy our natural environment, because they tell us, dig up more gold and sell it fast. You see, dig up more oil and let it go. They don't tell us what we would conclude if we were in charge of our own cultural and philosophical resources. In other words, they have destroyed a part of our mind, our memory, which is necessary if we are to live reasonable lives. This is a crime, but by not recognizing that it's a crime, by going to school to learn that we should borrow from liberalism, Marxism, and so forth, because we don't have our own, we are deepening the crime against ourselves. If we stop depending on those people who are misleading us, we will change the continent. For example, we will discover that there was a time in Africa when the people who thought about economics were of the opinion that no one able to work should be without land. You see, now that's African economics. But today, you will be advised to sell your land. And after you have sold it, you will find out that the Romanian or the Australian who came to buy it has discovered oil on it and is exploiting it, you see. There are things that we should know about our own ancient culture which would help us live better today. that is the reason, the main reason for learning these texts that were there. Chinese have no problem like that because they know their ancient culture. They read their ancient texts. We can also read our ancient texts. And that will change us and our society. Ayi Kwei, but he is Mancha. I mean, I'm just Ayi Kwei.
Okay, thanks, Ayi Kwei. I was wondering if you had considered this work you're doing it, I mean, why did you choose like hieroglyphics? Did you consider any of the other African languages? Or was this just the one that was best documented?
No. When it became clear that I could not live as a revolutionary, I decided to be a writer. Now, for me, being a writer meant getting to know the society I would be writing about. I think of my society as African society. It wouldn't make sense for me to know about Ghana, but not about Nigeria, not about Kenya, and so forth. So one of the first languages I learned was Kiswahili. Now, I went to Tanzania to live there and to work there and to learn the language. So, you know, the reason why I went back in history to ancient Egyptian literature is that I believe that if you want to know your society, you don't start from yesterday and say, only the information that begins yesterday is worth my while. You go as far back in history as possible. Then you have a whole knowledge of your society. Now, it so happens that for Africans, there was a period when there was a lot of intellectual activity, and we are lucky in that some of the records survived and can be studied. So, I started studying the ancient Egyptian writings. Anytime I met somebody who knew how, I would ask them to teach me. And then when I went to Dakar, there were people. Sharon Tijok was there. His students are still there. On my way here, I was given information on the plane that one of the members of, of the group that produced the book that you're looking at just got his PhD in Egyptology. So if ever you want a professor of this language, there is somebody called Yokoreka. He's from Burkina Faso, and he's a member of our group. We discuss things with him. He knows the grammar, so if we're going off, he brings us back.
That's to be I don't know, should I speak to you? Yeah, I mean, well, many of Japan say Ayesha Harruna and Ayi Kwei Armah yeah, Ayesha Harruna, I'm really like excited what you're doing right now. As in, I see this in line with Sheikh Anta Diop's like what do you call his vision, as in the origin of man. Yeah, pretty much. I see the same thing happening here with maybe the origin of literature and all of that, and I can only like congratulate you on this feat. My question would then go to Ayi Kwei Armah. I think in an earlier conversation you said that we should not focus much on pre-dynastic like Egypt, but we should rather go to
sorry, like dynastic Egypt, I should rather go to pre-dynastic Egypt.
Yeah.
I didn't quite catch your reasoning for that, so if you could hit.
Yes.
And,
Wait a minute, let me answer that question and then you can go on. Now, dynastic stuff is about kings and queens and this and that, and you know, it makes some people feel good. But think about it. If you need kings, you're going to need slaves, no? Kings and queens, they're about inequality in society. Some people like that, I don't. You know? I think it's unjust to take human beings and treat them as inferiors. It doesn't matter whether you are the one sitting on top or below. It's unjust, and we should have the courage to see it, even if we are supposed to become the manager. We admire our royalty too much. We admire them so deeply that we don't see that they are the disease. You see, if you are royal and other people are below you, there are very few barriers preventing you from selling them if that's necessary for you to maintain your royal status. You see? Now, we have to get to the point of deciding, do we want democracy? If we want democracy, it means we treat everybody with dignity. You see? We're all equal. That's egalitarian. Now, if you're studying dynastic Egypt, you won't see the egalitarian element except as an underground current. It's been pushed under.
In the elephant peasant, it pops up.
It pops up just the way anything you suppress, but which is natural, will come up, you see. Now, if you have access to pre-dynastic elements, it becomes clear, because in that period, before the kings and queens became dominant, there was a system, a way of life, which depended on companionship, not hierarchy. Not I am your leader, follow me, but I'm your companion. Come with me, we'll walk together, we'll study together. That's the reason why I say our fascination with dynastic Egypt is childish and it's destroying us. We should study it. We should allow people who want to glorify themselves to do so, provided they don't destroy our continent. Meanwhile, there's a system, another philosophy based on equality, which is called Ma'at. You know, it was so widespread in the pre-dynastic period that it became a cultural norm. Ma'at means justice, it means balance, it means equality. We have all this in our history. Ignorance is keeping it away from us. It's not in our consciousness because part of our memory was cut off. Imagine a computer that doesn't have its memory. You see? That's what we are. We better retrieve our memory, and if we do, we are going to become better than we ever imagined we could be. Okay?
My second question, I'll switch back to Ayesha. I'll say you've studied Medinature. You've also gone through some African languages, and in the hopes that we can pick out the African language, from all of these. But right now, what is the African language looking like to you? I've got about one more to Ayi Kwei Armah. Ayi Kwei Armah, we said so Papa Fie if you say you watch it, now Wakacha and person besides say open, so what they want home and be by a bit me at
I could reply to you in my mother's language, fancy. Motum is a fancy you are, no? Na say, the man, one of our once a fancy, yeah, all right. You what can more question? Na yeri penny, Mother Brafo, no matter the you one. Huh? I will speak English for the benefit of those of you who don't have the privilege of having been born in his culture. Okay. Look, one question was, did I bring some books? A few, very few. And in the last few days, I have met people, dear old friends, my classmates at Achimota. You know, I mean, it was natural for me to. Right. You can always get our books from. You go to a website, if you can remember it. It is called BB Kwan. Little letters, you know. BB Kwan. BBKWAN. bbkwan.com. You go to that website, all our books are there, you can order them. The website is run by a friend of ours who saw us doing this kind of work, and she said, well, this is beautiful, I want to be part of it. You know, she's Chinese, you see. She likes the African stuff we're doing. It says something to her. And she's running that website in San Francisco. We want to have websites in Nairobi, Johannesburg, and so forth, but that's harder than having it in San Francisco. What was the other aspect?
We're now starting.
Sorry, your main motive. Yeah, why you
Oh, okay. My motive for coming here was that every 10 years, everybody who's living outside has to come back home to renew their passport. I think governments are afraid that there are ill-intentioned people who might show up at international airports with Ghanaian passports, even though they are originally from Afghanistan or, you know, the Islamic State or this and that. So it's a security matter. You know, I came to get the passport. When I was in Senegal, I mentioned that I was coming to a senior Ghanaian official, and he said, don't come, wait, let me get the groundwork done, because if you come, you will wait forever, you won't get it. Well, I came, I went to see this kind official. He says he had read my books as a student, and therefore he didn't want me wasting my time. So he got me the passport the next day.
So,
Okay, the language we're still working on. This is a work in progress. It hasn't started. It's a thing to be done together. So still looking for people who are interested. We started with about 1,000 basic words in English, and then now we need to build up the vocabulary. So it's a project that's open. Whoever is interested can let me know.
So I can't be here because of the speaker, but Ayi Kwei Armah, it is an honor to meet you and to be here with all these beautiful people. Yeah. 1, 2, okay. So, one, okay. So my question, you know what? I'm going here. So
my question, can everybody hear? Yeah. My question is about language. Obviously, this is what we're here discussing. A lot of people are of the opinion that on the continent we should have a language that connects all of us. You mentioned Kiswahili as a logical language, as there are a lot of people that speak this language and a lot of people on the East that do. I'm curious your opinion on this language being propagated west, north, south, east, and being a language that, or if not Kiswahili specifically, what language then will make sense?
Languages are sometimes imposed through catastrophe. For example, countries have been overwhelmed by some cruel robber, normally described in history books as a great conqueror. Now, an armed robber can unite a territory and impose a language on it. This has happened in history. Or a religious fanatic can impose a language like Arabic on a large population and so forth. We have had English imposed on us and we've come to love it. Therefore, we have made it our official language. If ever we wake up, we will decide that it's absurd for us to have to switch languages when we reach the border with Côte d'Ivoire. On commence à parler le français. When we reach the border with Guinea, we're going to speak Portuguese and so forth. Why not? Why not design a new language for ourselves which has elements from various languages in Africa? Okay? This means that the people who design the language will just be doing preparatory intellectual work. They will have no power to force anybody to learn the language. They will just be saying to our leadership, look, if you ever want to act rationally by having everybody talk to everybody else without using expensive interpretation and so forth, if you want every African child to be able to speak to every other African child without impediments, here's a tool. We are offering you something useful. You're welcome to it. You have charge. But before we can offer it, some of us have to develop it. Some of us have to spend the time developing a language which has appeal. We won't be the first people to do it, you know. Indonesia has a common language for a country that's really an archipelago. Lots of different islands, some with their own language and culture, but they chose deliberately to design a language for themselves, and they're doing okay. Israel, which is not normally cited as a great example, has done that. Before Israel had the political power to put a language in every school, the people who worked on the adoption of Hebrew as the language studied Hebrew, worked at it long before the thing became a political problem. So if we are cultural workers and we're interested in providing tools for later generations after we are gone, then it's our responsibility to do the intellectual groundwork that will make the language available. Because one never knows when African leaders meeting at the African Union will decide, hey, we say we are united, but we don't even have a language. And if they look around, well, here's a language solution. Okay. we want to provide solutions. And this is work we can do because intellectuals work with languages, you know. If we do it well enough, we'll have a language which takes bits and pieces from every corner of Africa in such a way that people learning the new language will not have the feeling that I can see myself in this thing. It'll be like a mirror, and a Zulu will see themselves in it, a Lesotho will see themselves in it, Congo, Tanzania, Ethiopia, you know, every place will be there.
Hello. All right, thank you for giving me this platform. I would like to ask, from the Asian Kemetic proverb saying, man or woman know thyself. What would you... Know thyself.
That's how it is said in that language.
Okay, what would you define self to be in relation to understanding what our ancestors did concerning the language that they spoke, the backward language they spoke? What would you define self to be?
The what language?
The backward language they spoke. Not backward per se, but then with the hieroglyphics.
Oh, you're calling the hieroglyphic language a backward language?
Not backward with that sense, but then backward in the sense that they had hidden meanings with what they said. And I would like to know, what would you define self to be in understanding what they said?
I cannot define self for anybody other than myself. In my attempt to understand myself, I had to study. I had to study my personal history from the time I was born, where I was educated, and so forth. I found that that was not sufficient. I wanted to understand who my parents were, why and how they met to protect me. After my parents, my grandparents, and then I wanted to go as far back in history as possible. I studied the Akan traditions, for example, my mother's traditions, and they said that we didn't come from here. We came from a place that is now called Senegal, Mali, and so forth. So, when I look at the Malians, I studied their traditions. They say, we didn't come from here. We came from the great river. We came from the place we call Sudan now. Okay. Now, all these traditions have helped me situate myself in a stream of humanity that has flowed all over this continent. This is how I understand myself, as just a part of this long stream. The more I know about the stream itself, the better it gets. Because when you study African history, at some point, you see, okay, let's say a little over 3 million years ago, you know, humanity appeared in Africa in the form that was to become us. Now, when scientists discovered traces of this humanity in Kenya and Ethiopia, you know, they provided scientific evidence and so forth. Now, you can connect with all the new information, and if you connect that way, you will know that there was a time when people left Africa along various paths to go and populate the rest of the world. In effect, the deeper you go, the clearer it becomes that we are connected with all humanity. Now, for me, that is the sense of self. A self that is based on knowledge, not on prejudice, not on ignorance. So I'm constantly trying to find out about this self. I can say I am permanently ignorant about myself, but I'm trying to learn more and more about this self. And if I meet somebody who's interested in the same project of getting to know themselves, I would like us to go on this journey together.
Good evening. In the earlier conversation that we had with you at the Institute of African Studies, I asked you a question about language, and you used the phrase "growing cooperation." I was asking you about if the new language doesn't mean a colonization of what we know now, as say Akan, if we are to adopt a new language. So my new question, which is a follow-up really, is what then will happen to our other selves? If, for example, today we adopt a language, we design a language, what becomes of the other? And then how would we negotiate it? Are we to permanently leave that, or we coexist? And then what becomes of it? And then the second question, you use a stream of sea, and that is exactly what Anidohu does, using cloth and all those as permanent markers of memory. Your book, Healers, for example, you talk about the art of healing and how we can learn from our elders. So, as you are here today, what does mentorship mean to you for the art of healing, for knowing ourselves? Thank you so much.
The first question, what happens to the old when the new is born? Well, there's a natural answer. I'm about to die. Ayesha is about to blossom. It's normal, it's natural, it is to be desired that what has done its work will go to rest. Something new and more dynamic will take its place. If we ever have a language potent enough to unite Africa and to excite the intelligence of African youth, we shall not regret the dormancy or even the total disappearance of Akan. It will still be available in language museums. You know, we should not think that there's anything that ought to be eternal. We should only be worried about the quality of the lives we make. And if a new language can give us a better quality of life than Akan ever did, well, why not? Let us transcend Akan, but we shall make room for the nostalgic people who wish to speak Akan forever and ever. They will become tourist attractions. People will come and look at them and say, hey, look, he can speak a language that is now almost dead. He is one of 3 surviving people who can speak that language. Hey, shake your head. No, I don't think we should worry about that kind of positive development. You see? This Ayesha has a baby. She has to go. Yeah, she really has to go. Babies take priority.
I was like, what's that? It's all good. How's a beautiful.
Hello. For our friends in the back, there's room on this side. You can sit, or you can come this side. There's room on the mat over here. You can also sit. So let's not stay in the back and stand throughout the conversation. Hello.
Hi.
Ago. Our friends outside, please come in. There's room in the front. We have 40 more minutes with Ayi Kwei Armah. Let's make it count. Alright, so let's come inside and settle down, please. And let's be quiet, and it would be nice if our phones are not ringing while the conversation is going on. Thank you. Hello.
Thank you very, very much for what you've shown. Should I go ahead? Okay, I am a Muganda from the Baganda in Uganda, and we speak Luganda, just so everyone is clear on that. One of the things I've been learning about my language as I get older is the importance, well, the history that is told in the language. So as you speak, you learn certain things. And I'm going to give you a little example. When we greet each other, if I come to greet you, I will say, Erate, and you will respond, Erate. So now the beginning of that message is saying, is it calm? And then the response is, yes, it is calm. And what that means is, well, it's indicative of the fact that we used to live on the lake. And so you used to travel across water a lot to greet each other. And so for me, that means that language tells me a little bit about my history, because I didn't know that until I started asking the meaning of a word that doesn't actually have any meaning related to a direct greeting. So I appreciate what you're saying about how, you know, we can let some things die. The old can pass and the new can take over. But I just wonder how we start to then select what is important to carry on. If we have this unified language, there are certain things, because we do need to carry our history in our hearts, in our souls. How do we ensure that that is not lost when we move towards that unity? Thank you.
The importance of historical memory is partly in its ability to select. And it's great when we can decide to keep what has proved of greatest benefit to us and to drop what was either inconsequential or harmful. Now, the principle that I have found in ancient Egyptian culture for the preservation of ancient values, ancestral values, is a selective principle of memory, selection for archiving. There was a spirit in ancient Egypt called Jehuti. He was the spirit of writing, of calculation, of memory, of judgment. Okay. His contribution to culture was to say to people, if you want to live well, you must constantly keep in your memory the things that are most useful to you. So even if a language dies, the archives will contain things. Ancient Egyptian is a dead language. Latin is a dead language, but we read those languages and we can still today extract from those languages what we want to use, you see? I mean, scientists still find something new in the botanical field and they give it a Latin name. See? They are using the ancient archives to advance. They're not sleeping on the past. They're moving forward, using the past. We can do that. No? You agree? Okay.
Good evening. So I was late. I don't know if my question has already been asked. But yeah, I'm going to switch the conversation a bit. So I came across The Beautiful Ones I Know You're Born when I was like 12, but I didn't finish reading it and then I lost it. Then after a while, I was wondering where you were, and then I found out you weren't in Ghana, and you hadn't been in Ghana for a very long time. And then, I can't remember who I was speaking with, but the person actually said you had self-exiled. I don't know how true that is. So that is what I would want to ask, like if you self-exiled, why you self-exiled. And then, you mentioned earlier about finding self and then learning about the fact that we all were from here, we have come from Senegal, Mali, and all of those places. So I want to know if that information influenced, in a way, you're moving out and then you're moving to Senegal.
Okay. The question of self-exile, we can resolve that easily. No, I'm not an exile. I've never been an exile. And anytime I'm anywhere in Africa, I am home. Amen. That's me. I'm not a nationalist. I am an African. See? So, is that satisfactory? Okay. The next point is about what influenced my decision to settle in Senegal. Well, actually, my plan was to live in different parts of Africa, so that when I talk about Africa, I will talk genuinely as an African consciousness. Having lived, eaten, made love with people in all the different parts. I mean, yes, 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 yes. Well, I'm talking straight writing technique. You cannot write honestly about something you do not know. And I was ignorant about the rest of Africa, not having lived there. So I made a life plan to go and live in different parts of Africa. I've been north, I've been south, I've been east. And before I came to, Senegal, I was planning to find out what the oral tradition about Japan coming from there meant. You see? So I went there and I found that, yeah, these oral traditions are accurate about who we are. But when you go there, you also find that their traditions say they came from the Nile Valley. You see, there was a scholar in Senegal doing a great deal of research about Nile Valley civilization, Cheikh Anta Diop. So I took the opportunity of being there to try and contact him and find out, how best to continue my research. People in the back, do you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So, I'm following a life plan, that's all. I want to get as much knowledge as possible before I write. And whenever in my writing I reach a point where I feel ignorant, I stop and I do the research which will cure me of my ignorance. Then I continue. that's the way I operate. As for living in Senegal, by the time I got there, I was able to gather friends to start a project. I wanted to have a cooperative publishing house, and my friends enabled me to do it. And when I went to the village, I was welcomed. I was welcomed. So I built this place, or let's say we built the Writers' Workshop and a dormitory for young writers where Ayesha stayed when she came to study. The place is still there so that we can welcome people who come to study, or if they have a book to write and they need a quiet place, they can come. It's a very nice place for writing. There's the sea, very beautiful, and the people are pleasant. So a writer living there has no excuse not to write. You come to write. We've had the experience of this backfire. A young person from Ghana came saying he wanted to write. He took a look around the place and he said, "Oh, this would be a great place for Yes. Well, I hope people can find places closer to home. Yes, so if that's all they want to do.
Hello, my name is Ninoy. My name is Ninoy. And my question has to do with the challenges you face with translating. Because when I was going through one of the books that were being passed around, it said Ukeni Biasem or something like that. That's the farmer's tale. But in the English translation, it says the peasant's tale.
Oh, you're making a difference between the peasant
and
the farmer.
Because with our society, we know that the farmer is a big person with a relatively higher social, with a relatively higher social status than a peasant. But so I want to know, how does your work try to remedy these challenges? Because if you say peasant, and for example, I want to be a farmer. And if I see that the translation from Ukeni means peasant, it kind of disheartens me, So I want to know, how do you remedy these problems you face? Thank you.
No, the farmer is the fact who was also allowed to consider himself a farmer. The peasant was a farmer. In the way we use the word peasant, it's just somebody who makes his living from farming a plot in the countryside. So there shouldn't be a big problem. You are talking about a particular kind of farmer, a big farmer. The peasant is a small farmer. Both are farmers, But there are other challenges. Yes. Translation always comes with challenges.
You create new words, or try to use, stick to the local language.
No, okay. In the ancient Egyptian language, the word for a peasant, the word we translated as a peasant is sakti. Sakti. If you know how to read it, you will see it says sakti. Now, saket is vegetation. Sakti is the person who lives in the vegetation. Just as in Afghan you would say, Habanasi, Anamukwa. So, the person living among the vegetation. Now, that's the meaning of it. So, I don't think there's any distortion. No.
Okay. Hi, Kwei Armah. Wonderful to have you here. I'll ask this in English.
Right.
I have a question in the resolutionaries.
Right.
They are coming together and they are talking about how to decide on the design and the creation of the language as a shimsu, a small collective. And they mention things like the most euphonious sounds and simplicity and things like that. And I'm wondering how those decisions would be made, because the members of the collective have all become they've gone far into European languages and they are perhaps not as rooted in African languages. So I would think that perhaps their decision making in terms of what's euphonious to a Yoruba speaker, Kwei and Kwei would be quite euphonious, or to a Hausa speaker, some of these other sounds, implosives. So just to keep it short, could that decision-making process go beyond the Shimsu collective to be egalitarian on a larger scale, especially given access to greater technology? Could you have people, I guess, vote, for lack of a better word, on some of these things? I think about in Yoruba land they say Kwei, in Cuba they say Pue, because they can't pronounce it. So someone in Cuba would make a different decision from someone in Yoruba. You understand, so I'll keep it short.
Yeah. It's a fact that some sounds are easier to pronounce than others. Now, if I were a designer designing a language meant for millions of people, I would want to privilege the easiest possible sounds. Some sounds, I think, will create difficulties for some people. I mean, not everybody can do a Kosa click. Should we impose it on everybody by designing a language that contains those clicks? I would vote no. I would also vote against the, because I think you can make words without the, throat gymnastics required for producing that, in other words, the people actually engaged in the design of the new language would come up not with the rules, but with suggestions. What determines whether people use the suggestions or not would be practiced after that. Yeah, that's all.
Hello. So this is like one of the about 1 million questions I would like to ask you. You mentioned decades ago, and even right now, that you write because you failed to do something else, and also as a defense against total despair. I would like to know whether you still write for the same reasons, and also in hindsight, will you be willing to pick up guns and go be a revolutionary? Yes, and how's the book about Kwame Nkrumah coming along?
Okay, the book about Kwame Nkrumah, it was finished some time ago, but I wasn't satisfied with the quality, so I let it lie for a while. I am redoing it, but meanwhile, a project came up, and somebody fell ill and so forth. I had to take up more responsibilities. That project is the book you see now. My input in it became bigger. I normally do, I can do layout, but I don't do computer-aided graphics and design. The person who does that is the one who did the cover and who typed the hieroglyphs. That's my daughter. I taught her to use computers, and she does these things, provided I pay her. Now, see, because of the new load of work, I had to drop my own writing, because I think this is more important. It opens doors, you know. I have finished with this. When I go back, I'll be on the Nkrumah book. But it has become two projects. One is a book of fiction. The other is a book that will be called Myth, History, Philosophy, and Literature, the African Record. You remember Wole Soyinka, a very good friend, wrote a book called Myth, Literature, and the African World. He suggested that African intellectuals should stop our lazy habit of depending on European, Western myths, Oedipus, Hercules, this and that, when we want to explain things, and go into African culture in search of usable myths. I am carrying this now. He used Yoruba myths because he understood those. I am carrying on the discussion by adding myths from different parts of Africa, including ancient Egypt. Right, okay. I'm 77 years old, which means I cannot possibly be a revolutionary. I don't have the energy. So the best I can be is what I am now, a reactionary writer. Oh, yeah, if I were 22 again, well, and if there was a revolutionary movement in Africa, because when I left Harvard, there was a revolutionary movement in Southern Africa. People were fighting for freedom from apartheid. In Angola, people were fighting against the Portuguese. Now, I thought at that time that young African intellectuals would be drawn into those struggles. And I thought that if we spent time helping in the liberation struggles in Angola, Zimbabwe, Namibia, South Africa, we would end up acquiring skills that made us competent managers of social change. After the liberation of those territories, what would we do? We would return to our natural bases in Ghana and then you would have a cadre of competent revolutionary Africans in a number of countries, all hoping to unite the continent. So what I discovered when I went to the training camps was that they would say to me, hey, you're an intellectual. You know, there's work for you to do as an intellectual. They thought that it would be a waste of whatever the resources they were thinking about if I went into battle and got killed. I didn't agree, but I couldn't force them to take me. So that was that. I was in Algeria when it became clear to me that I could not go and get trained. That's what I wanted to do, to be a fighter. Oh. I was condemned to be a writer.
Hello, so, hi,
Hello, this side. Hi. My name is Kanyesile. I'm from South Africa. So I'm very grateful that you actually mentioned that you're African first. You know, you're not a nationalist, because that's sort of the standpoint I have. I've got two questions, or they come in two parts. Do you think Africa has had a revolution or has had revolutionary encounters? Yeah? And the second one is about decolonization. Right now in South Africa, we're having a student movement decolonizing education. And we're trying to figure out, like, Africa is contextualizing this movement happening in Southern Africa for the rest of the continent. And so since you're an elder, how would you think about this moment of decolonizing, particularly because we're thinking of ourselves, or Africa is looked at as a post-colony, when we're still much living out the aftermath of being colonized and still feeding our colonies. Yeah.
Okay. Have we had a revolution or revolutions in Africa? Okay. In a revolution, what used to be under comes out on top. Okay? In that sense, having Mugabe on top instead of Ian Smith is a racial type of revolution. A group that was pushed down has managed to come up, although it's still being beaten down with different instruments, okay? In South Africa, what Mandela and the ANC engineered was the rise of, the vote. The vote. I mean, you would be able to vote today. 30 years ago, no. So that would be considered a step forward. Okay. But as to whether there's been a revolution in the economic field, you know that the economy is still in the same hands. The main difference being that if you are lucky, you could qualify for black empowerment and get some of those, the riches that were denied to black people in the past. No? All right. There has been no economic revolution. You can have a political revolution without an economic revolution because you can vote. But if your vote is useless for changing the way you use your resources, then you have the right to talk, but not the right to walk. So some people will dance and clap for that. Okay. What was your other?
Decolonization. Right now, the student movement in South Africa.
Decolonization.
The second one was loud. The second one was decolonization. The student movement, or students right now in South Africa, are decolonizing education. So we are also trying to figure out what that means for the rest of the continent, and how do we further the conversation of decolonizing Africa, when even in the post-colony, we are still feeding the colony.
Well, throughout Africa, the educational system that we agree to keep is the European model of education. It's very accurate to call it the academy. It's academic education. And I hope you know enough Plato to see the origins of the academy. Plato established the academy as a means of stabilizing society by educating a tiny minority of the privileged who would ride above the helots, the vast majority, who were to be denied the privileges of education because they were being trained to be used by the free minority. That is the basis of liberal theory, that you need freedom, but not for everybody. Liberalism is not about freedom for everybody. Scholars who think or say that liberalism advocates freedom for everybody, they need to learn to read. Because if you read the texts, Plato is perfectly clear and Aristotle is brutally clear that freedom should be enjoyed by the best in society. That's what aristocracy means. People who have appointed themselves to be the best. Therefore, in the Western educational system, the privilege of higher education is to be reserved for a selected minority. Now, Plato argued that in the selection of this minority, some way should be devised so that those who fail will not blame the society but themselves. They would consider themselves to be failures, not good enough. So you got the exam system, you know, you fail, you fail. Now, if we want to move away from the Platonic model of education and define freedom as something good, not for a small minority, but for all of us, everybody, then we would have to devise an educational system that does not discriminate against any baby, any child. Free education for everybody, you see. Now, I think that's what the struggle is about now. Because sometimes you can educate one generation free of charge. But when they have good jobs, when they're employed by the UN, which gives them an allowance to send their children to school in foreign institutions, they will come home and say, there's not enough money to educate everybody free of charge. So let us impose fees. In that way, they will create a class of children whose parents can afford to be well educated. The rest, well, they'll be welcome to join Boko Haram. Now, because if we adopt the Western system of education, we are also adopting Boko Haram. That's what happens when you educate a small elite and you leave the others unaccounted for. They will find somebody who will say, okay, you come, I'll give you a motorcycle, I'll give you a gun, you become a big shot, and you have a future. Because it's criminal to have an educational system that gives the majority no reasonable future. It's the job of society to educate all its children without demanding that a child pay fees. Children going to kindergarten are paying fees because their parents hope that they will join the, that is criminal, irresponsible behavior. But as you know, our ruling elite suffers from that. We have always had problems with being responsible with our resources and the future generations.
Just off of that, I'd like to know, do you think violence...
Form of violence. I mean, violence is not uniform, it's multiform, I'm considered very violent by some people. I don't hit people, But sometimes what I say gives them the impression that I have hit them. You see? So intellectual violence, yes, is inevitable, because when you have had somebody stamping on your neck, that is violence. There's no way of getting rid of it without pushing them away, you see. So that is the way intellectual struggle proceeds. The people who have imposed the lie on us, they have done violence to us. We have to find the energy to push away this violence and establish the truth about ourselves. But since it is profitable for them to be violent to us, they will resist. What do? Do we say, in the interests of Gandhian non-violence, we shall only appeal, we shall not fight? No. You see? To take the Gandhian position, you have to be in love with the oppressor. Yes. And the person who is in love with the oppressor is a thing, not a human being. Yes.
Wow.
Ayi Kwei, go here. Right here. My name is Kwei Armah. One of the things that I've noticed about our people is that whereas they are very quick to go back to languages, even dress, the look, that is quote unquote African. When it comes to the issues of spirituality, we are very quick to push African spirituality into the realms of being demonic and and I mean anything other than a form of spirituality. What role did the Asian mysteries play in your self-actualization, if I can put it that way? And then the second question is the writers' workshop in Popol still going, and how does one become a part of that?
The writers' workshop has changed. It's changed because of the way we fund our enterprises. We do not take foundation money because foundations have their agenda, and we're not ready to follow the agenda of any foundation. We do not take government money because all African governments are broke. And they need money, and they have to go and ask the World Bank and IMF and so on. We would be cruel to add the burden of our needs to governmental needs. We do not go to banks because interest rates in Africa are very high. So we would end up working for the banks. What we do is we take money from members. We contribute. Those who have surplus money, instead of putting it in a bank account, they give it to parents, and we produce what we have to produce, books generally. But for a person like Ayesha, when it was decided that, yes, we want to bring her here, yes, we want her to have no financial worries while working, some of our members took upon themselves the burden of looking after the child, and she came and worked. Now, that's the way we do things now. If we find other sources of funds, we will be able to take young writers and teach them the techniques of writing. And if they want to study hieroglyphic writings, why not?
Hello.
on the spirituality. Well, we are a militarily conquered people. You know, what we call our countries are the result of military conquest from outside. And military conquest, to be stabilized, is followed by spiritual conquest. Now, the content of European spiritual conquest in Africa was Christianity, just as Islam was the content of Arabic conquest in Africa. The success of these various conquests has led to a situation where most Africans think they're either Christians or Muslims. Some don't even know that Islam only came to Africa in the 7th century. They think it's always been there, it's an ancestral thing, you see. And as for Christians, some of us say it's our custom. When we die, we want to bury in a Christian fashion. No less a person, no less a Pan-Africanist than Nkrumah said, I come from a very primitive society. And when asked to define himself, he said, I am a non-denominational Christian and a Marxist, and I see no contradiction between the two. Where was Africa in that? We were convinced when we went to school that Africa had no worthwhile spirituality. Abosom, fetishism, witchcraft, primitive stuff. And therefore, if you wanted to be saved, then you became a Christian. That's what most of my parents' generation did. And I find that most of my generation was deeply religious and Christian, you see. So, I'm in this situation where I'm joking with my friends and I'm saying, okay, Pastor so and so and so. But that's what we are. We don't respect the roots of our own spirituality because we don't know. We have been given only the most ridiculous aspects of our spirituality. If we learn to read the ancient text, we will discover some wonderful things. And then perhaps we can begin to embrace our own spirituality and go forward with that. Myself, I am not a spiritual person. I am rational. Which just means I like to use my brain, you know, before anything that I do. And in that, I'm following Jehudi. Jehudi says, before you do anything, think, calculate, write, decide.
I'm very excited to have met you today. I first came across your book, The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet One, when I was in senior high school. And it was so difficult for me to understand. I tried to read and realized that the writer was from Sekendi. And I felt a connection when he explained some things in Sekendi. I was really praying for a day to meet you, so I'm happy to have met you today. Now, I tried reading it then. I didn't really understand. When I got to the university, I think I understood it somehow. And it was shocking that in the final pages of the book, the man was, I think he was coming from the sea or wherever, and then he stood somewhere and watched the driver give the policeman one CD.
Who speaks Kiswahili? Kitu kidogo.
So the man saw the driver give the policeman one CD in a fashion that I'm very familiar with now. This book was written about 30 years ago. So my question is, what has writing really done? And that's writing about the corruption in our society 30 years ago, it's still the same and even worse. About the language issue too, Case Miliford talked about it in Ethiopian Unbound, about getting a common language and all of that. Over 100 years ago, we still haven't done anything. So this kind of talking and writing, and even your kind of writing is quite difficult for the ordinary person to understand. So does it really get to the people who are supposed to know it? And what does writing do for us?
You're in a hurry. To go where? Okay. You know, for 400 years, our society was conducting an economy that was basically the use of people, making us slaves and so on. 400, you see. Now, you are complaining about 4 decades? No, change can come very slowly. The important thing for me is not whether I am able to create recognizable change. For me, it's good to know that while I live, I do my best to bring forward the things I think are best for our society. You see, in writing that book, I was following a model that was established very long ago. The title, Nefer, was the name of a companion of Djibouti. It was called Asa. Now, Nefer means the beautiful one. The group that formed around the beautiful one was interested in changing society for the better. So they spent their time searching for ways of improving agriculture, improving medicine. You know, they were the inventors of writing and so forth. So the beautiful ones, they are simply the people who will make Africa the better society we all dream of. I don't think they're born yet, because when they are born, we will see signs. There will be people around working to improve our society. You know, when Nkrumah returned to the Gold Coast, Ghana, something very interesting happened. You would see people standing everywhere, talking, discussing what should be done. Why are we living like this? What can we do? And the end result would be, we are forming a party, come and join us. That is going to happen someday, all over the continent of Africa, when people have the information required. If I'm alive, I will be part of it. But if I'm not, I hope you will be part.
One of my questions escaped you earlier. I asked about what mentorship means to the art of healing.
Boss, can we spread the mic a little bit? Yeah. We have very little time left, so let's not hug the mic a bit.
Mentorship. It's a natural process, you know. Whatever you know, you teach the younger generation, because knowledge is a social product. It's not me that knows this. I have absorbed a lot of information from my society. I give it back by training younger people. Now, in that training process, do I just teach my own children in the hope that they will follow me? No, only a fool will do that. Because, look, the society is much stronger than any parent. So if I was hoping that my children would grow up to be writers, I would have committed suicide by now. They say to me plainly, Papa, this is not a profession for us. You know, they think there's too much sacrifice in it and not enough reward. You see. But you meet somebody who is not your biological child, but your spiritual child. Ayesha is my child, you know. I didn't know her, but when she came, I recognized somebody who wanted to learn and somebody who wants to teach. And we got together and it worked. Now where I live, they say, Sadom, be your child. Yeah, and that's what it is. That's what mentorship means.
Good evening. In the prologue of 2000 Seasons, you talk about the first 1,000 seasons being the seasons wasted, wandering, amazed along alien roads. And then the second season is spent finding paths to the living way. In what state of mind were you in the 70s after the overthrow of Nkrumah and the, let's say, the halt of so many black liberation movements? What state of mind were you that inspired you to sort of analyze the situation as a situation where, as a dark situation that is, that in terms of it being a very long road from the present? And where do you see the present 2016? Do you see it in the first 1,000 seasons or the second 1,000 seasons?
I see social change as a long process. Sometimes it can produce results that look sudden, you know, but as McLuhan said, to the blind all things are sudden. Now, if we are thinking about the history of Africa, then we should be ready to spend centuries working for the world we want to make, you see. If we want quick results, we're likely to be perennially disappointed. That's the way I see the process. My state of mind when I was writing the book had very little to do with the fall of Nkrumah, because I was not an Nkrumahist. I liked Nkrumah, you know. He was the best political phenomenon that happened here. But for a Pan-Africanist, he sometimes defined himself in rather narrow ways. In his autobiography, he says about this thing about being from a primitive society, and he specifies that he's talking about the Nzima society. Now, if he had delved into the history of the Nzima, he would have known that this is not a primitive society. It's a highly creative society. In fact, in the book, he says, well, they don't kill people, and so forth. So, okay, if not murdering people is being primitive, and high rates of homicide are the sign of development, okay, then you're going wrong. I think if he had looked at the history of the Nzima, he would have connected with other African people, because the Nzima are just a part of the Akan, who themselves are a part of an older stream, you see. So I think the choice of identification, the way we identify ourselves, can open ways or can block them. You know. The paths to a living way, we need to find those paths for ourselves. And the best paths are those that will lead us into
communion with others.
I don't know how to address you.
My name is Ayi Kwei Armah.
Ayi Kwei Armah. Growing up, personally, I had Christianity gently shoved down my throat. And I knew something was wrong. And I was not free, or totally free, till I read 2000 Seasons and The Healers. And so for me, I'm just saying this to say thank you very much. And we made a small thing. And I don't think I could have made it if I hadn't read your books. So please enjoy it for me.
I wanted to ask you about power.
Which power? P-A-W-A or P-O-W-E-R? Is the Pan-African Writers Association?
No. P-O-W-E-R. I feel like we're in a very particular moment right now. Like quite a special moment. I feel like I've heard the word revolution quite a few times tonight, and I feel like it's a quietly revolutionary time. I feel like, especially here being in Ghana right now, there's people like Manche and Sion and Accra.org that are quietly but very, very, very strongly undoing, like in a very deep way, not in the surface way, not about like political systems, but in a way that has to do with consciousness, like undoing and redoing and refinding in a way that's very truthful and in a way that kind of turns us inside out and makes us look and ask ourselves. I've been having a kind of fight with Audre Lorde for a couple of years now. Not in the real world, but conceptually. She wrote this thing where she said that you can't unbuild, you can't unbuild the master's house with the master's tools, or you can't knock down the master's house with the master's tools. Now, what my struggle with her is that you can't knock down a house if you don't understand the tools that were used to build it in the first place. And so my struggle has been like, I have to, if I want to not necessarily knock down a house, but build one that's seen on equal ground, I have to understand how this house was built in the first place. I have to understand viscerally those structures of power in order to undo them. And to understand those structures of power, I have to become a kind of living anthropologist, like enter them to understand them inside out. But then I feel what happens when you do enter those structures is that where do you find the truth? Like where do you find the truth of what is to come? Like who do you find it from? I know there's like stuff within you that shows the way, but what language is there within these structures that you're kind of trying to undo in your mind and for which there isn't really a language yet? Where do you begin to find it?
In your intention, your purpose, you see your aim. I mean, if you want to know how to do something, you need a technology. If you want to know why you're doing something, you need a teleology. Now, your teleology is going to determine what kind of design you create. If you want to build a prison, there's a design for a prison. If you want a place where people are free to roam around, there's another design for it. So the main thing is to have your purpose and then to know how to design, not according to rules laid down for the building of some other house, but for your own house. You create your design for your own house. In other words, every viable system has a design. It starts with a design. Now, the thing about us, African intellectuals, leaders, call us what you will, is that we have skipped over the necessity of our own design. We have said, okay, there exists an administration with buildings. Let us step into these administrations. You know, when Ghana became independent, where were the president's offices, you know? In the castle, Blackstone House wasn't yet built, you know. In the castle. In other words, our leadership decided not only that the borders were worth maintaining, but that the administrative buildings and the administrative staff, the civil service, the way we do things, all of that was worth imitating. When you imitate, you have a great advantage. You don't have to think. But you have a great disadvantage. You are imitating somebody when you become their slave. Right. So, if we want to design something for ourselves, we need to recognize that stepping into somebody's mansion isn't the same as building your own house. One is more painful than the other, but one is better than the other. So far, we Africans have not made that decision. Nkrumah moved into the slave castle and made it. Okay. Nkrumah moved into the slave castle as the seat of power. Mandela accepted the existing economic system and the parliament and so forth. In other words, it's too difficult to create a new system. Therefore, people accept whatever exists. But when we get ready to be really free, we will create our own new system.